Hello everybody, Mr. Moo here in the cockpit, here in Elite Dangerous, here in the Harangue system at Brera Base, with a little bit of a primer on how to manipulate the background simulation of the game. What do I mean by that? The background simulation in Elite Dangerous is the political system, the planetary governments, the economies, the whole behind-the-scenes engine that drives everything else. When you sell equipment, data, drop off passengers, etc., you are affecting the background simulation. And you can use that to your own advantage if you decide you want to create your own faction. Now, creating your own faction, I leave that up to you. You're going to have to find the system you like, see if it's available. I'll leave a link in the description down below for the link to Frontiers forums and the worksheet for submitting your own player faction. This goes beyond that step. This is assuming you've created the faction, you filled out the worksheet, and now you go, well, crap, what do I do next? Good question. Here's what you do next. So, checking here on menu 4, on the status menu, you can see all the factions here in Harangue. You've got Bologna's Gold Touch Systems, Wongarateri Power Services, Harangue Corporation, Union of Harangue Republic Party, Harangue Gold Pirates, the Conservatives of Harangue, Harangue Silver United Exchange, and that's it. Now, you see the status here, they're in no status. The Gold Pirates are in a boom. They're going to get more influence. I'll touch on influence in a moment, but basically they get double influence when they're in a boom state. Civil unrest, this means that there's a lot of crime going on, and these two factions are in danger of lockdown. When you go into lockdown, your facilities aren't utilized to their greatest potential. Like your shipyard may be shut down, or your outfitting may be shut down, etc. Now you also see percentages here to the right, 27% and a down arrow, 9% and an up arrow, 20% and a down arrow, etc., etc. That is actually their influence within the system. How big a piece of the pie they get. Let's go over to the system map and we can look at... The Harangue system is not a fun system to fly in, by the way, because everything is down here around the beta star. Big system, lots to discover, a long ways away. So, you mouse over or highlight a station, and you see the controlling faction is the Harangue Gold Pirates. Go to this one. Controlling faction is the Harangue Gold Pirates. Landfall planets. Go down here. Looking for the big bases. Brera Base. Zoom in. Controlling faction is the Harangue Gold Pirates. The pirates control every station in the system, and most importantly, they control the biggest starport in the system, which makes them the default leaders of the star system. So, Harangue is now a pirate-based system. Candle Relay is just an outpost, but it's also controlled by the Gold Pirates. Those guys have this entire place under their control. So what can you do about that? Well, here's what you can do about that. If you decide to throw in with a different faction here, if you want to manipulate the simulation in order to get control, you go to the mission board, and you do missions for one and only one faction that you want to pump up. Your faction, some group you've taken sympathy on, etc. Gold Touch Systems has a couple of counterinsurgency missions here because they're in civil unrest. There's rebels attacking them. You also noticed here that there is a rep and an inf. Rep, that is your reputation with the faction. You do higher reputation missions, you will gain faction reputation faster. Up here in the upper right where it says cordial, faction reputation. You do higher reputation missions, that builds up into friendly and eventually allied. Influence. That is this faction's standing within the star system. System influence above faction reputation. Now these guys are sitting at, let's see here, Gold Touch Systems. They are sitting at 27%. They have the greatest amount of pull in the system. However, they do not have the starports. So they're in a funny little situation, actually. You see, to take over a starport, you can do one of two things. Actually, no, in this case, you can only do one thing. They're a corporation, and the Gold Touch Pirates are pirates, or the Gold Pirates. That's getting my factions mixed up. Manipulating the background simulation is a little counterintuitive sometimes, and this is why. This is where it comes in weird. So, what you actually want is you want the Gold Pirates and Gold Touch Systems to be at the same level with each other, 20%. Or you can bring the Gold Pirates up to 22, bring these guys down to 22. Bring them up to 27, keep them at 27. That's going to trigger a war. It's between a corporation and pirates. You're going to get a war. You do the wartime missions for the faction you want. You do the, you do the massacre missions. You go into the combat zones. You just plain fight and turn in a whole heapin' helpin' of combat bonds for the side that you're trying to help out. Eventually, when the war ends, the Gold Pirates will be knocked down a few pegs, Gold Touch Systems will be elevated a few percent, and Gold Touch Systems will have taken over a random base owned by the Gold Pirates. And this doesn't just work for the controlling faction, this works for any faction. You want their station? Try to start a war with them. In the case of two democracies, you end up starting an election. And then it's a lot of flying around trying to carry election materials, propaganda, publicity tours, etc., etc. But in this case, you get a war. They will get one station. It could be an outpost. It could be Kendall Relay rather than one of these stations here. But it could be Brera Base as well. In which case, since that's the primary starport, that can land the biggest ships, that's got the most facilities, Gold Touch Systems would end up in charge of the system. And then the system flips from anarchy, and it would flip over to corporation. And that's basically the way things go. So sometimes you want to help out the faction you're working with. Sometimes you actually want to carry them down a little bit. Sometimes you want to elevate an enemy in order to trigger a conflict state. Speaking of the states, so we've got civil unrest, which is a precursor to lockdown. Other states include famine. Pretty self-explanatory. You want to help the faction out, ship them lots of food. War, that's when you're at war with a faction from another system, or based out of another system. Civil war is when you have two factions based out of the same system. So they would go to war with Wangaritari Power Services, or they would go to civil war with Harang Corporation or Union of Harang Republic Party. Functionally, no real difference, other than if you have a system or a faction from another system and you go to war and you pound them down hard enough, you can force them into a retreat state where, since they aren't based in this system, they actually vacate and run back to their home system. Wangaritari Power Services, if they got knocked down hard enough that they got knocked into a retreat state, and then you kept on hammering and hammering at them, they would cease to exist as a faction in the Harang system. You would have kicked them out entirely, 100%. And then, everybody else gets a bigger piece of the pie to fill in the power vacuum. What else do we have? There's the influence. There's the reputation. Why do you want the primary starport? That's a good question. So this isn't a great example, but it is still an example that you can use. Brera Base, primary starport, or any starport that you own. If you own an outpost and you can only land small and medium ships, fine, this still works. Bounty hunting and trade helps your faction's influence. If you do a ton of bounty hunting and you turn in 10 million credits at Brera Base, the gold pirates get the influence from that. It actually helps them out because they can say, see, we're legitimate businessmen. We help out. We are miner friendly. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But from the outside perspective, it looks like, hey, bounty hunters are turning in here. They must have something good going on. So that will actually, if you are working for any other faction but the gold pirates, bounty hunting here and turning in here actually hurts you. So if you can get control of a station, say that Gold Touch Systems gets a hold of one of the outposts. You can turn in all your bounties there, and then it will help them out, elevate their position, and diminish the position of the gold pirates. The same thing with trade. You want to, if you're just doing commodity trading, turn in at the station owned by the faction that you want to help out. Otherwise, you're just helping out the other guy. Again, harangue is not a great system to try to help out because everything is out at the 200,000 light second mark. It's doable. It looks like there's some mining and some bounty hunting possibilities here, but if you do any exterior trade or doing missions out to other systems, you still got to make the jump back here via Super Cruise, aka the long route. Now you can do things other than trade. This is an anarchy system. So what you could do is just start blowing the bejesus out of any gold pirates. You blow up their ships without turning anything in, it diminishes their status because suddenly, even though they're pirates, there's somebody else in the system blowing their people up, and they can't seem to get a handle on who's doing it. That diminishes their status. That diminishes their pull. You blow up their ships, and they don't get any hits back. Well, obviously, they aren't fit to rule. That's the way it goes. You can do that for any faction, any system, anywhere. You want to go into Sol and attack only Federal Allied ships? God bless you. Good luck with that. But if you're good enough, if you pull it off, if you can just keep hammering on that faction's particular ships, yes, you are going to get a bounty that everybody will be, loving to get because that just turned into their brand new retirement fund. But you can diminish that Federal Allied faction or whatever, since every faction in the Sol system is Federal Allied, I believe. I think that covers the basics. It's boring sometimes. It's a grind. It's limiting you to one system. But, if you want your own faction, this is the way it goes. This is the housekeeping segment. A good way to build up influence I've found is these bulk passenger transport missions. Low in reputation, really high in influence. They're the triple plus mark, which is the highest mark of influence gain that I've found. So you've got 16 refugees here. They want to go to Heaviside Survey in Wongariteri. You got 3 refugees here. They want to go to Heaviside Survey in Wongariteri. There you go. You've got dual high influence missions. Decent pay. I mean, it's going to turn into 300 grand roughly. We're flying 3,000 light seconds and dropping some passengers off. other missions. Let's see here. You notice the long distance missions and the sightseeing adventures actually don't pay off as much. HIP 5881. And it should show you Caleri Port, which is arrival point estimated 2200 light seconds, 2300. So there you go. Now you can at least see where you're dropping them off as well. The really, this is really, well, it's medium level influence, decent pay, but you're way much longer. So honestly, these bulk transport missions like this, 22 tourists, 12 refugees, if you have the faction rep with them. Up here, 13, 3, 16, yeah. These bulk missions, I've found, are the best financial payout for you and the best influence gain. Now, as well, if you're... Alex, I wasn't talking to you. If you go to the mission board, now, Heaviside Survey at Wongariteri, you're taking a bunch of passengers there. Just focus on that same faction, Gold Touch Systems. Is there anybody going to Wongariteri? Counterinsurgency Surface Scan Mission. Well, it's in the same system. And it's high influence, high rep, well, moderate rep, and a decent amount of payout. But there may be missions that would be just... Is there all skimmer destruction? This system is in a bad... This system's in a really bad way. But there may be like data courier missions or, drop off so many commodities there. You can double up passengers and data missions for the same faction if they are hiring out to the same faction. And as this is starting to run towards the 20-minute mark, I think that pretty much covers everything. Do missions just for the faction you want to elevate. Try to get them onto parity if they aren't in charge of the system. Try to get them into parity with a faction that has a station you want to control. Try to trigger a war state or an election state. And if you get the primary starport, if you get control of the system, then if you crank your influence up to, I believe, like 70%, and if you can hold it there for a few days, you trigger an expansion state. And if you can keep going on that, you will expand your faction into a random neighboring star system. If you can do that, then you can repeat the process over again. And honestly, at 70%, you're doing pretty well, and the home system can kind of maintain itself for a while, because all the background trade is also generating. All the NPCs doing trade, they're generating influence. It's kind of at a maintenance level when you have control of the primary starport. Anyway, in a nutshell, and maybe not so much of a nutshell, but without getting into the deeper nuts and bolts of things, that's the 20-minute lesson on what it takes to manipulate the background simulation and what it takes to get your own faction going, or somebody else's faction, in Elite Dangerous. Take care, everybody. See you out in the deep dark. I've got some passengers I need to haul. Take care.